Hello all. Thanks for being here. My audio works immediately, right off the gate. Isn't that exciting? This is all. This is, yep, anyway. So yeah, we're gonna do Hanging Chads again, which I'm really excited about. Here we go. One second. Hey, Kobe, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Do I sound good? You sound crystal clear to me.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I don't know why my camera is not where it's supposed to be on the screen, but other than that, uh, this is fantastic. The equipment works as it's supposed to. Big surprise,
My
fingers crossed on
my
that one.
internet works. I'm not. Nothing's wrong. I know. I'm chilling. So it's been a good day for me so far. At least went to the farmers
So
market.
far, yeah. Hold on, let me just adjust my face. Um, uh,
I went to the farmers market. Bought
okay.
some soap. Bought my mother some flowers. Bought some little baked cakes. I bought a little carrot cake. I bought a little lemon blueberry cake. I bought some carrots. I bought some corn, and I think that was it.
I love that you went there and like I'm not as thoughtful as you are, Kubi. So like I wouldn't have, I don't know if I'd have bought my mom flowers. I would have bought everything else that I need. If she had asked for something, I would have gotten it for her. But I don't think it would have occurred to me. Oh, let me just get my mom like an otherwise unexpected bouquet of flowers. But you're built different, so.
I'm a wonderful son. I know. I just am just blessed to have me. There were
Well,
sunflowers. They felt good. I felt like I don't know. I felt in vogue.
Well, I feel blessed to know you, because I
I
always
feel
have a good
blessed to know
time with my friend Kobe. Hello, all. This is Hanking Chads. Uh, Back once again. We do this every Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, or every Sunday that we can at 8 p.m. Eastern. um, so yeah, we are going to be looking over at the Crystal, Kyle, and Brianna Joy Gray. Well, Crystal and Kyle versus Joy Gray, and like a debate they had. And on third parties and like their usefulness within our system and like should you vote for them? I thought so. I watched this debate already. I mean it's pretty interesting. Did you see the hour-long version, Kobe?
I believe so. I think so. The first version I might have watched, or perhaps maybe a 45-minute version.
Mm-hmm.
But I did watch a very long, full discussion, which I thought was pretty good. But I'd be curious to watch. I find, at least for me, at least a lot of these things, my first watch is my first initial gut reaction. And then
Yeah.
on my second watch, many times things become, get kind of revealed. I notice something, an argument that the first time sounds really good, the second time not so much. So I'd be curious. This would be the second time I'm watching.
All right, cool. Yeah, so and I'll say at the start that I am split. I am definitely split on this, so I don't have like hard opinions. I can be swayed either way. So I'm really interested in hearing what my friend Kobe has to say about all this. So, oh, do you want
I
to say something?
probably, just for me, I live in California.
Hmm?
I'm Let me honest, I am probably not going to vote this coming up year. Mainly just because it feels like there's no even 1% chance that anything other than Biden is going to win California. That it's just a beyond foregone conclusion. And n- I don't know. It has nothing to do with any kind of sympathy for Trump. My opinion of him is not
Yeah.
improved. It's only
So he
decreased in the end.
says in public. Okay, sure.
Exactly right. But I just, it seems as if the political project that the Democrats want to explore is one that I'm becoming more and more skeptical of. Believing, half solutions many times bring about, when you try to solve a problem halfway, many times you bring about a greater infection later on. And so the more that I begin to kind of really sit with that, and then the older that I get, the more that I begin to actually want to engage in politics. I want to engage in a way where I will actually be helpful. And I'm unsure if I'm going to be helpful in the project they're building. So I'll be curious. Maybe on the second time I'll be reconvinced by
Well,
Crystal and Kyle.
but I gotta respond to that. So first of all, like, do you mean vote at all, or vote on the presidential level? Like, you're gonna leave that blank, or are you just gonna? You mean like you're not gonna vote? Period.
Probably, I'm unsure on this. Definitely on the president. I'm unsure on the second one. Leaning probably towards. Again, I'm as I begin to kind of reevaluate some of my own personal morals and my own personal perspective on things. I don't want to be a useful idiot. I don't think that's going to be helpful for anybody, and I don't want to put my vote behind somebody that in 6 months I'm going to turn around and find that I vehemently disagree with. So perhaps that demonstrates some kind of cowardice not to act. But I don't know. I don't think I have enough grounding right now to be able to look and see, let's say a local city council, something, something with very specific elections that I feel like, I don't know.
There are so it's difficult for me to keep track of local stuff and even state level things. But I do some research because like I refuse to vote if I don't have any idea anymore, right? I pissed my dad off when I told him that one time. But like it's pointless if I have no idea. If I'm just like checking all boxes randomly. Like if it's between a D and an R, well, maybe sure, but like if it's between multiple like D's, if it's like a jungle type situation, jungle primary like you guys have in California, well then what am I doing? So I actually do some research, and you can find, especially I'm sure in California, like resources that give you an overview as to what they're about. And the good thing is that whoever you choose, you probably will not hear about them until you vote the next time around. So because that's just how that works, right? But I don't know. Like when we're talking about things like the sheriff's department, right? It actually might be good to look into that. That your vote actually can be useful if there's someone better out there than your current sheriff. Like these are the things, the places that uh, are are like the stickiest offices because they're like low information and voters don't really hear about those races. So I think it's worth it to try. Um, but I mean I get the sense of like hopelessness there with like centrist Democrats, right? Like I go off on centrists all the time. I yell at Wick like daily, it's like my daily affirmations is I yell at Wick for his sentiments. Yeah, but like that's like I guess I have not much to say on the presidential level, but I don't know. I'm one who wants to engage in both, right? I think there's importance to electoral politics, but also there's other ways to be helpful, like you said. But I don't see why you have to choose one or the other. But
I think you pointed out something very, very true that, some of the, I think, sheriff, one that came to my mind was like school board.
yeah,
I think those are much more, many times the choice is very obvious. It's something of, do we teach evolution or not? It's something of, some big, law enforcement thing. So I now that you frame it like that, that's something I would reconsider. My answer probably would be, there's probably certain things I, probably would vote on. Again, in California, it's very difficult because many times it's like somebody who's very good on social issues, but very bad on economics. And then somebody who's very good on economics, but very bad on social issues. Many times that, at least that is what I find. You'll have the people that are in the big cities. I live in kind of the effect area of San Francisco, and so many times like the people that are critical of the big business in San Francisco are also very critical of the social policies of the big businesses, which happen to be very progressive because San Francisco is a very progressive area. So it becomes a sort of devil's bargain, which I find very I'm very much not interested in dealing with the devil right
okay. Well, fair. Well, we'll get started and we'll see what these three have to say. Here we go.
To a special edition, I'd say, of Crystal Kyle and Friends. Not only is it Crystal Kyle and Friends,
Oh,
it's also
this
sort of
takes
like
a while to
dual
get started.
thing. Nobody in the audience to know on yet, and we
So
just
basically, what so Crystal Cal, this is Crystal Cal versus Brianna Joy Gray on Cornwall West and voting for third party. And Crystal and what Cal is saying right here is that he extended an invite to Cornwall West previously, and they've had him on previous, but like for his campaign, he hasn't come on their show to directly defend himself. So that's what we were saying. I'm just skipping past that part.
You can respond to it. And Crystal, here's my first of all, in the Democratic primary, because I'm a registered Democrat in New York, I will be voting for Marianne Williamson. Very happy and proud to say that. I'm the chief Marianne Williamson bro out there. I'm leading the charge. Now, in New York, I'm in a safe state. So would I vote for Cornel West in New York? Yes, because I have a 95% agreement with him on policy. And I think it would be nice to get the Green Party in a position where if they become more viable because we get ranked choice voting or something, it'd be nice to grow their popularity a little bit. And when we get ranked choice voting, I think they kind of automatically become a lot more viable. So I'd like to help out in that process. But if I'm in a swing state and it's Biden versus Trump, I'm at the point now where I don't even think it's a tough call. I would definitely vote for Biden, because either in that situation, even if other people are running, either the Democrat or the Republican is going to win. And in my estimation, Biden has definitely passed what I would describe as my bare minimum purity test. And I think if it's him or Trump, or even him or DeSantis or anybody, he just blows them out of the water. And so I think I'd happily vote for Biden in that instance. Your response?
So I similarly was voting for Jill Stein in New York in 2016.
I did the same.
And I also happen to believe that strategically it makes the most sense to apply pressure to the Democratic Party by voting for not Biden in a primary. Marianne Williamson is obviously the most progressive candidate in the primary, and then vote for Cornel West in the general. And I know there are a lot of people in my audience who are frustrated by that plan because they think that it takes something away from Cornel West's run, or it affirms the Democratic Party in some way to vote for Marianne Williamson running as a Democrat. I don't feel that way. I feel it's a little hypocritical to have that position, given that we all just enthusiastically voted for Bernie twice in the primary the last 2 rounds. You can make a distinction saying that Bernie was an independent and he always identified as an independent, and Marianne Williamson doesn't have that kind of cloak of distance from the Democratic Party. You can say what you want. I don't see those things as mutually exclusive in the least. So that is also my plan. I differ from you only insofar as that I would say it's a more difficult choice in a swing state to decide what you're
Are
going
you not seeing the Kobe? Hello? Kobe? Oh boy. Hello? Everything's frozen. Fuck, why is everything frozen? Okay. I don't know why everything is frozen. Fuck, why is everything... One second, guys. I'm not sure if the people out there can hear me, but Discord crashed. Hey, buddy.
Hey, what's up, bro? Yeah, it just messed up. I was worried it was my internet.
Okay, all right. Was it me? Was it just me?
I think so. Because on stream it's saying we can hear you, but the video is frozen and I was frozen. So I don't know.
Okay, yeah. All right. So okay, let's see if we can work this out. I don't know. Like, hey, Respect. Thank you for resubbing for 39 months, man. You're awesome. Thank you for the kindness, honestly. Discord just kind of fucking froze on us, which is really unfortunate. But we're gonna try to get back on track. Share screen. All right, can you see you?
Yes, we're back in action on my screen.
Okay. But I am frozen. Wait a minute, hold on. No, I'm not. 1 second. Let me turn my okay, hold on a second, everyone. Just completely threw me off. And let me drink. Okay. All right, I think we're back. You deserve for your dedicated work. Hey, shout out Respect. I really do appreciate you. You're awesome. Okay, so we're back and we're just gonna continue on. I'll back up for a bit. How long was I out? For you? I don't know.
It's hard to say in my end. I'm not gonna lie. I do. I mean, before right before you start, I do gotta say something that Kyle said, at least that I said that I agree with. It's like I don't like. I feel like you really do have to be stretching your definition of better if you're going to try to argue that Trump and Biden are not. Biden is not better than Trump. Like I feel like I feel like that is just pretty obvious. Whether it's like Supreme Court picks, whether it's like foreign policy, whether it's unbelievable, cultural effect that Trump had, the negative cultural effect that Trump had. Biden being the president, I think, is just much better in that sense. I don't know. Are you somewhat more sympathetic to people that don't see one as obviously better than the other, or what do you think?
I'm not. I think that yes, Biden is obviously better than Trump. I think there's simply no doubt about it. Um, like, look, as you know, I'm not shy about criticizing Biden, but I can recognize the reality of the situation. Biden is not who I want. I don't really believe in him. I think that he just made some like really good picks in terms of the NLRB and also the FTC. FTC is I think the one I'm thinking of. I think he's made some like great picks, maybe pushed by Bernie to do so, but other than that, like, meh. But still, like, better than Trump. Like, yeah.
I will make a perhaps somewhat of an ableist claim here. I've been doing a little bit. I've been kind of upping my reading of the the sort of like journalism about the Biden administration as we get closer to 2023, and I'm beginning to become more sympathetic to people that argue that Biden is not all there upstairs, and there's a lot of sort of his sort of the people. There's like quote unquote the shadow cabinet behind him, kind of pulling the strings, and I personally view that as like a benefit after 4 years of Trump, right, where there was so much people being fired and hired, so much of this one personality. There's something about the idea of the president being this person who it's more of a cabinet of people who are making the decisions, and then the president is just a mouthpiece for that cabinet. And maybe that's just maybe I'm crazy there, but I mean in my opinion, especially when we're coming off of 4 years of Trump hiring, firing people all the time, of this extremely individual driven presidency, having a presidency with is much more of a president by cabinet, president by committee. I view that as being that the kind of decisions that are going to come out of that. I'm fine. Those are the two choices.
I have so many problems with what you're saying. I have so many problems with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I don't think. There's, I have conflicting emotions about what you're saying. Like, they're all negative, but like negative for different reasons. So I'll start here. I think that most presidents like they may have a singular, some of them at least may have like a singular idea of what they want to do, but they all roll by a level of consensus with their inner circle, with like their cabinet and their chief of staff and like those type of people. They're like their top advisors. That like I would imagine. Obviously, I can't be positive because I'm not in the Oval Office. But I would imagine that like there are very few people who rule singularly. And overall, I mean, like, it's a good thing because I want a president to be able to listen to others, right? That to understand that they may not have all the answers, and of course not, right? That's why you have a defense secretary. I mean, maybe that's not a good example. But that's like we have the agriculture secretary because you might not know anything about agriculture, and you want to leave that up to them. So there's that. But like what you seem to be okay, but before then you talked about Trump, and Trump, I think he was a lot of things. I don't think he was actually doing much ruling. I think he was doing a lot of flailing around, angrily flailing, and that involved tossing people and people quitting because they couldn't stand him anymore, right? But that's just like an angry flailer rather than anyone who's actually like steering a ship. And I think that With Trump, you got what you're saying you wanted for Biden, right? Where it was like the last person in the room got Trump to go in that direction. Like Trump was just like taking on so many different voices. Remember, Trump has no ideology. He doesn't actually give a shit, right? When he was campaigning in 2016, he was just like A/B testing all his policies, right? Like you saw him in campaign rallies actually do this, where he'd stand for one position, it would get booed, and then he would go for the opposite position a few minutes later, and it would get praised, and then he just went, okay, that's my position. That's how he built his campaign, because he actually doesn't give a shit. But other things other than his pride and filling his pockets, like really other than that, it doesn't matter. So that's your rule by consensus. And but then you say like, well, I am fine with a guy who's lost, whose mind is not lost, but like degraded, right? And that I'm fine with like nameless bureaucrats like being able to steer the country, right? So that I guess we can just yell at Biden. And me and progressives can have our complaints at Biden, but in the end, it's his nameless bureaucrats. And then beyond that, I know this is a lot of conflicting things, right? But beyond that, especially when we're talking about Democrats, well, actually both parties, they have their donors who they listen to all the goddamn time. So I what is my position? My position is that I want to vote for someone in who has a vision and who executes that vision. And I want that person though to be able to listen to the council of people around him. Though I also don't want him to simply be bought by corporate financiers who back his campaign. That's what I want. It seems like what you are fine with is a doddering old fool who has these who knows who surrounding him. Also taking messaging from the corporatocracy. And you're saying this is a good state of affairs.
You oscillate between describing my position as fine and good. I would lean describe my own as more to the fine and less to the good. I don't like this state of affairs. This is not the one that I would choose for. As I talked about earlier, I have a level of skepticism of engaging in the political system as it is right now for the reason that, for the many of the reasons you just said. I do believe the DNC is too influenced by the donors. I do also think you make an interesting point. If I think you, at least from my perspective, you illustrated the point I was trying to make well, I thought. That Trump wasn't doing much ruling. It was just sort of like a renegade pirate captain that never gets to the ship going because he's hiring and firing and having mutinies. And he has no ideology, so he kind of rules by a different, he rules by fiat, but a different kind of fiat. It's his own personal thing. That's what I don't like about Trump, right? That I feel like there's no rhyme or reason. There's not a consensus or an orientation with which his administration ever went. I agree with everything you said there. I would say not that I think it's a good or a good thing, but the alternative is there is not a third choice. The alternative is this kind of rule by bureaucrats with a senile puppet as the face. Not thrilled with that. Very skeptical of that. I don't even like supporting that on the bottom level. You know what I mean? But that's the option. And so those two, that just seems pretty obvious. That seems pretty obvious.
I hear you, but that wasn't that wasn't the thing that I was responding to. Mm-hmm. I was responding to you saying that
I phrased it too strongly, too positively.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I'm trying to be glass half full here. If I'm looking at it as after 4 years of Trump, we've gotten 4 years of it is the faceless bureaucrats and the puppet Biden. And again, I prefer I've gotten a lot of personal improvement in this time. Maybe these faceless bureaucrats got something going on. Obviously, I'm not thrilled. I would like other bureaucrats, ones with faces, human faces, as they say. But if these are the ones, either if it's faceless bureaucrat or proto-fascist baby, I'm team faceless bureaucrat.
So, one more question before we go. But let's see if this is going to be a short one. this seems to be a change of position for you. Because previously you had told me, right, and you told me in a very inconvenient moment, that you believe that donors have very little effect on Democrats. So you've changed your mind?
Yes, yeah. As I've done more, one of the things I've been reading a lot, I read a lot about the kind of like just cultural changes that happened to America between like the 1950s, the 1970s, and 1980s. And I begin to kind of see the way that what I kind of, as growing up, somebody growing up in California, just immersed in a liberal culture, what I thought was the water that everybody was swimming in was actually like that water got changed. I don't know how to put that metaphor. When you're a fish swimming in water, you don't notice it. I didn't realize that this, there wasn't, that this was not the way it was in so much of the world. And I just assumed it was that way. And that kind of biased me towards the idea that it's like, I don't know how to exactly, I don't know how to exactly, articulate this. You're completely correct. This would absolutely be something that I've changed in. But much of the idea, I've come to realize that a much smaller amount of Americans, whether I like to admit it or not, 50% of people voted for Trump. A much smaller amount of Americans truly believe in a kind of liberal way of life than I thought they did. And I think a lot more of why people agree with it is because of economics. You move to a city, you start being around these kind of people, you get friends, you kind of living in a city kind of culture. What's it called? Encourages a what's called cosmopolitan kind of life, kind of easy live and let live kind of morals, which then kind of lead to a liberal kind of consensus. And the more that I kind of understand that less as a personal choice and more as like a response to economics and response to, then I'm going to be more skeptical of the kind of economic kind of things that the donors are going to be, donors are going to be. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry for rambling. You point out a very good question that I probably would not even be, as I'm saying here, I probably don't even know why this change in my thinking has happened. But I would definitely have begun to agree with you more. I do remember I kind of remember these conversations.
The reason I just brought that up, one, just because I wanted to explore that change with you, but two, and probably more importantly, because when you first let me know how you feel about that, right? Like, I was dealing with Destiny, I was dealing with Destiny, and I was in a fight with them, and then, like, I remember there's probably a bunch of people on screen and who were, I think, either agreeing with Destiny or just being neutral about it. And then you demanded to get on a panel, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll pull you on. And then you're like, oh no, I take his side. I'm like, fuck you.
If I could listen, okay, if I could go back, I would. I would go back. I would. Okay. I had a very similar kind of thing where there was an argument that I got into with a friend like 6 months ago, and I just texted him today, and I'm like, I'm letting you know I've done more reading, and you were totally right. You've completely won. You've retroactively won. So again, I would be very clear. If I could go back, I would come in. I would epically fucking own Destiny. Okay, and I would talk about the only reason he has. No, I mean like, that's a very funny little like reference there. I want to think about this question more, and maybe this would be something, and maybe I'll try to find a video where we can explore this more and explore some of my thinking here more. But I look back and I see it less so as a bottom up change. A lot of the acceptance of sort of like, again, sexual revolution, more conversations about about race and gender and class in cultural study. I see that much less as a bottom up and more so as a top down of the effects of academics, of overt academics on education, of the effects of media companies, and the effects of advertising firms on society. These kind of things. I used to be very skeptical of one of the very central claims that the critique. What's the critique being made when we're critiquing the donor class? We're critiquing the way that economics influences culture. That the culture of the Democratic Party, the ideas and things that are accepted, seen as good and bad, are too much influenced not by people's actual intuitions or moral principles, but by the money that they're being paid. I used to be very skeptical of claims about that in general, because at the very base, the idea I was just skeptical of. I viewed social change as being something that comes, so that the gravitational force, so to speak, of it being bottom up was so strong that I was just so skeptical. Like it wouldn't even matter. As I guess what was my thought. even if these corporations tried to do this, this would not be the way that culture works. But I've begun to become more skeptical of that, and I've become to view more that become to view something kind of view more that's like you tend to believe what the society around you encourages you to believe. So I don't know, it demonstrates a naivete on my part, and probably a naivete on the part, I guess we would say, on the part of someone like Destiny.
Okay. And I'm going to challenge Destiny on that again one day. But anyway, well, let's continue. And I skipped back a bit, so because I don't know what part you missed and what the audience missed. So here we go.
Independent, and he always identified as an independent. And Marianne Williamson doesn't have that kind of cloak of distance from the Democratic Party. You can say what you want. I don't see those things as mutually exclusive in the least. So that is also my plan. I differ from you only insofar as that I would say it's a more difficult choice in a swing state to decide what you're going to do. But I frankly respect people who feel comfortable. It has not been something that I have to contend with, but I respect people who feel comfortable voting third party even in swing states. And the reason is this, and it goes back to that early bad faith viral Noam Chomsky interview, in which I asked him about a month before the 2020 race. Look, I said, I take your point. Let's say Trump is an existential threat. Let's say that he's a unique threat among all Republican candidates. My concern is that every year, because we all vote for blue no matter who, because most Democrats vote blue no matter who, or most left-leaning people do, the message that gets sent out is that Democrats don't have a bar. You can go as low as you want, as close to the Democratic Party as you, Republican Party as you want, and there's a ratchet to the right effect. And Republicans know that they can keep being more and more extreme. And so I want you to explain to me what you predict to be the stopping point at which we're no longer saying this new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. This new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. Tell me you're not going to be saying the same thing about Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever other person comes down the pike. And he was unable, in my subjective view, to respond credibly to that claim. So if somebody could tell me strategically what the stopping point is going to be of making this argument of the lesser of two evils, I would be open to the idea that, okay, this is the last one. Donald Trump, fine. He tried to steal the election, fine. That is a new line that he has crossed. But absent an acknowledgement that we are creating our own destiny by lowering the bar in these ways, I'm not comfortable coming out and criticizing anybody who no longer wants to be complicit in that kind of a system that's enabled the Democratic Party to not have a primary, treat Marianne Williamson as badly as they've treated her, treat Bernie Sanders as badly as they treated him, and openly come out and say they don't have to hold a free, fair election. The DNC argued that in court,
So let me explain.
So before we go on, what do you think about Brianna's argument there? And that I've lived through a few elections. I paid attention even before I could vote. Paid attention, and especially in this modern era, it's always the same argument. Hey, this is existential. We can't allow these guys to win. I think I think this picked up after Bush, especially. But that we can't allow these people to win, and you've got to vote for blue, and don't worry about what our policies are. It's simply better than theirs. It seems like what she's saying, that we're creating our own destiny. That if it's a fucking Ron DeSantis next time, let's say in 2028, or if it's if it's anyone, if it's a Chris Christie, it'll be the same argument, and how these Republicans are irredeemable, and because of that incidentally makes us the better choice, and so that's why you should vote for us. What do you think?
Yeah, so I've been looking into this, and I had a conversation with you a couple weeks ago where we talked about a similar kind of idea that I had, where I even referenced this kind of this exact ratchet effect. I looked into this. This has actually been talked about by political philosophers before. So I think in Hungary, Romania, one of the sort of communist states in Europe, the dictator of that country used what he called, or I don't know if he called this, but it was called by historians, the sausage strategy, right? Imagine you have a sausage, and one end of the sausage is moldy, right? What you're going to do is you're going to cut like a little bit to the left of the moldy sausage, right, to preserve the rest of the sausage, right? And the argument being made is that every single year, right, we have to cut more of the sausage until we're theoretically left with no sausage. The only thing we're left with nothing, or we've given everything to the other side. And I kind of worry that this is just like an effect, as you said, it's been ratcheting up ever since like Bush. I think this is like the effect of like a polarized society, right? So you have a society becomes stretched like a sausage, right? Where any political coalition has to be a coalition of people that all kind of don't agree with each other, right? We have to be a popular front between liberals and progressives to go against the Trump conservatives, right? And because of this, this is going to be the strategy the other side will inevitably use, which will be try to get the people on one side to believe that the liberals are too liberal and that there's chunks of liberals that need to be cut off, and then the other side that convince the liberal. And this is really because the liberals are bigger, they're the ones that the right is trying to affect, right? They're trying to convince. The idea is to convince the Bernie wing to drop off of the Democrats, that we would do better if we didn't do these socialist policies. And so I don't know. I mean, I think, as you say, it seems, I think there is a level of truth to it. I think you see it, right? Where it's like at some point we're slicing our sausage here. Where the next time that we reassess, the next morning we look back to make breakfast, we have much less to use. We have much, what are we advocating for in that the hypothetical Ron DeSantis 2028? Let's say Biden wins, Ron DeSantis 28. What's going to be the platform, right? You're going to have to, if we have to reduce ourselves more and more to meet them. I don't know. That does seem true. But I don't know. Maybe that's just the price you have to pay to weather the storm and win, right? To win power and stop Trump and be able to give our culture enough time to. I mean, right now the two leaders are Bernie Sanders, super old man, Biden, super old man, Nancy Pelosi, super old woman, Cornel West, super old man, right? There's not a lot. There no one who is like a young force that could be a leader for a progressive movement. There does need to be more time. And perhaps maybe it is true that these are compromised, these are stopgaps, but perhaps that stopgap is necessary to give us the time to actually create something that could actually be a negative force.
Well, I think something that's happened is that, first of all, the boomers just refuse to let go of power. And that has gotten the situation like Nancy Pelosi is going to be running again. Who else? There was someone else who should obviously be dropping out, but maybe it was Nancy Pelosi I was just thinking about. But I thought there was someone else. But Biden himself, he said he was only going to run one more time, like a run for the one term. I think the Democratic Party has not made space for the younger generation. I think this has been a deliberate thing, and it's been a disaster. They fought tooth and nail. Generation X was just like obviously crushed and never got a chance to do anything. And then I don't think even Harris is Generation X. I'm not sure about that, but I don't think she's Generation X. And so like they got likably crushed, right? So then it's up to millennials, but they don't like the politics of millennials, and like making room for millennials means there's less room for themselves. And so they haven't given us a space for superstars. And then of course there was Obama 2010, right? The 2010 midterms where the Democrats got crushed. This was a plan by conservatives. The red state, I think it was called Red State. They had a name for the plan, where they like wiped out the Democrats across the board. Like more than 1,000 seats on all levels. Democrats lost in terms of legislators, and governorships, and that had a lasting effect. That 2010 election, right? That's 13 years ago. That had a lasting effect because that took out the rising stars. That just like wiped the board clean and filled it with Republicans. And the Democrats have done nothing to like push the next generation, so that at this point, I can't think of many people other than Biden, right? I can't think of many people who would be a good choice. That's a failing of the Democratic Party. right? Like, let's not put that on us. Like, people like lay that on me. Well, I guess you can't think of anyone. Like, well, what has the Democratic Party done to actually develop talent, right? To get behind younger individuals, push them forward, say like this is the future, right? Only now that Nancy Pelosi is near her fucking deathbed that she's even considered letting what's his face the corporate suck up Hakeem Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries take her place. But after years and years and years, and then you got the media like jerking her off, like it has to be Nancy Pelosi. If it's not Nancy Pelosi, the Republic will fall apart. She is what stops. She's what halts the darkness there. And you had full buy-in of MSNBC and CNN on this. So I just don't want us to forget that. Like this current state of affairs is one that was created, right? I don't blame the Republicans because of, well, I mean, of course they were trying to win, and they did win. They crushed us in 2010. But I blame the Democrats for not caring to respond. Go ahead.
I would the question I would ask. I think you're speaking a lot of truth here. I've heard this funny term here, the idea that this is like a thing around a lot in a lot of places in the world. A lot of places where there's a lot of these old leaders or kind of this boomer class.
They're
kind of holding on. Okay, well, I've heard so in sorry, in Norse mythology, the end of the world is called the Götterdämmerung, which is the twilight of the gods. And I've heard someone refer to our current era as the Boomer Damarog, the twilight of the boomers. This is the age in which the boomer politics die, and we sort of enter a time of monsters where a new generation of politics are yet to be born. And perhaps you're describing some of these new leaders were killed, sort of, hypothetically, were killed in the cradle. I think there's a lot of truth here. I would just wonder, and I don't really know what the truth would be. Which two of these hypothetical paths is one in which the Democrats are going to be more likely to be spurred into helping a new generation of leaders foster a new generation of leaders? Is that going to be 4 years without power or 4 years with power? And I think that obviously, in my opinion, my intuition tells me 4 years with power. Another 4 years of Biden will put us as a republic, as a country, and us as a party in a better position to actually address the Boomer Damarog. However, that's my intuition. I don't know if that's the case. One could argue that it was Trump administration that brought us people like AOC and the progressives, and that was the closest thing to this new generation was brought by Trump. But also, that seems like a big, again, that seems like a devil's bargain. Hypothetically risking 4 more years of Trump to ideally bring about this new, this new generation. So,
I don't think either of those paths equal a new generation of leaders, right? Like electing Biden or Trump. What does that have to do with advancing the cause of young up and coming Democrats? By young, I mean like in their 40s and 50s, honestly. but
the question would be which one of these would make the Democratic Party as an organization more likely to sort of begin that process or more likely to engage in this?
I don't think either. I don't think either of these are a stimulus to that, right? Like they've had 2010 was 13 years ago. They've had time, right? But they simply didn't bother. Trump getting elected didn't do it. Biden getting elected didn't do it. I don't know why we think that a second round of either of those would do that, right? Like the boomers want to hold on to power, and they have no plan, zero, for what comes next after them, because they don't fucking care. They don't care.
I wonder though. What would you say though? I would totally say that there was a very significant cultural change in the way that we talk about these social issues, and a significant change in the viability of progressives between the years 2016, beginning of Trump era, and 2020, when America began to enter the pandemic era, than the same years of the Obama years. In the Obama years, I think the Democratic Party, in many ways, became more the Democratic Party going into 2015, going into the Trump years, is one that has adopted a lot of social progressivism, but was much more neoliberal, one could say, in their economic policy. While 4 years of Trump spurred a lot more of an economic progressivism to be taken seriously within the party. I think that's a very common analysis. What would you say about that?
I mean, I would agree, but I don't know if Trump was the reason why, right? Like, what did Trump do? Trump didn't do like in office. Trump didn't do much that was extraordinary, right?
But he
Like,
demonstrated
he
a
did,
very big change in the base of the GOP, right?
but that, what does that have to do with? Yeah, yes, there's a change. Well, actually, I'm not sure if there was much of a change in the base. I think the base simply let their voice be heard.
Yeah,
I think there was, yeah.
Change of tune.
Okay, yeah.
But
But
we sorry to interrupt you, but we orient ourselves based off of our enemies, right? Based off of what our enemy does, and we have to do this, and we did this with 2016. The Republican Party becoming more open in their nativism, racism, anti-immigration rhetoric forced the left to take a more and deeper consideration of the white supremacy, and those kind of conversations about that began to foster in those years and began to be more mainstream.
If you're talking about, yeah, but sorry, if you're, I mean, I guess like as a counterweight, like sure, okay, fair enough. As a counterweight, sure. In terms of like the rank, like mask off racism of the Republican Party during the Trump years, yes, I guess it was a bit of a counterweight, but like in terms of like the Democratic Party, right, as an organization, I don't think much changed. I think we had like the Justice Democrats come through. I think we had Bernie Sanders come through. But these weren't the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party responding to anything, right? Like there was maybe a shift in the base to counteract what they were seeing on the right. But like I'm talking about the Democratic Party as an organization, and as an organization, like I'm not saying that it's completely immune to like outside forces. That would be crazy, right? But the thing you posed to me specifically was if Biden or Trump were to be elected, would that have the specific response, not of just like becoming more left or anything like that, just specific response of making room for a new generation of leaders? And I don't know how that stimuli creates that response, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I phrase it because I'm unsure. And like I was saying, I can think of sort of hypotheses, I can think of narratives of history. One in which paints the Trump administration as being a force that causes the left, the progressives, to have a bigger voice than the Democrats. And I think of a narrative that views this as being a larger project that's been happening that Trump was more of a reaction to. And I just don't necessarily know which one of those narratives I would say is being more accurate. And I think that to answer the question of whether or not 4 more years of Trump is worth it, whether or not Trump is truly is worse than Biden, you would need to kind of be able to answer that question. Is 4 more years of Trump going to be 4 more years with which the Democrats can turn into a party that can actually oppose the GOP? Or is 4 more years of tepid power what is needed for there to be those sort of internal repairs and internal coalition building?
Thank you, Viceroy, for resubbing and for gifting us up to Spaniard. Awfully kind of you. Thank you so much, Viceroy. I hope you're still there. Okay, so we'll continue on as usual with me and Kobe. We are 5 minutes in. 5 minutes into the video, and we are an hour into the stream. All right. This is going well. Let's go.
Explain a little bit of my position. I think that'll help respond to some of what you said there. And I'm also curious to dig in a little bit more to your analysis of how the Biden administration has actually been in reality. So last election in 2020, I did live in a swing state. I lived in Virginia, still live in Virginia, registered in Virginia. And it did not feel good to vote for Joe Biden, but I decided to vote for Joe Biden, which is something I said publicly at the time. But I said something very similar to you, which is like, listen, this was not easy for me. If you, wherever you live, swing state, not swing state, et cetera, you do whatever you analyze is the right thing to do. And the reason that I voted for him primarily at that time, even though I thought he had an atrocious record in the Senate, even though, complicit in the Iraq War, complicit in bad trade deals, complicit, like terrible things on crime, all that stuff, right? The primary reason I voted for him was because of the National Labor Relations Board. And because labor politics and building out union power in this country, to me, is one of the most important goals, and something that I think we all share and leftists generally believe. Now, in retrospect, not only do I feel good about that vote, he's actually surprised me. Now, I've got all kinds of issues, right? On the National Labor Relations Board, though, specifically, they just issued a ruling which could be a complete game changer for unions. And just to explain to people a little bit, basically, in the past, bosses could union bust with impunity, no accountability. Now, the process going forward is completely changed. If bosses are caught union busting, then that's it. There's no more election. It's canceled. They have to recognize the union and start bargaining with them. That's the biggest shift in labor relations we've had in our lifetime. So that's why at this point, I'm not only, it's likely to, I'm a Marianne supporter as well, but we can all see the most likely outcome is it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board isn't important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
So I think that's a perfectly defensible position. And I had this conversation on my podcast in the last episode, and there were people who would characterize that position as, I mean, you've heard the thing, you've been on the internet, being too credulous about Biden, or, being too comfortable in one's own position in life and not needing enough change and being happy with the status quo. People will say things like that. I think actually that if your priority, if you believe the path to meaningful change is going to primarily come through a kind of, I don't say this dismissively, but a kind of labor incrementalism, meaning there are meaningful labor gains that happen, but are not the type of which would radically transform the system the way that some people want to happen in a shorter term. And the way that some people might argue Bernie Sanders represented his movement as the goal of being, then that's a defensible position. But I have to hold space for the reality that there are people for whom, even as significant as those labor gains are, it's simply insufficient. And what they see when they look at the trajectory of the last 50, 60 years of Democratic Party politics, when they read Listen Liberal and see the longer game the Democratic Party making a concerted choice to back away from labor in a way that has gone on for decades and isn't necessarily turning around as a consequence of Joe Biden having some good NLRB appointments.
So let me actually,
and then I want to jump into it.
So number one, I don't think that in massively increasing union density, I actually don't see that as incremental change. I mean, if you look at the chart of the decline in the middle class and the decline of union density, you'd be hard pressed to find a more significant factor.
I made these arguments as well.
But the other piece is, I feel like those same people who are right about the Democratic Party, they were right about the analysis in Listen Liberal, right about the fact that you had, this free trade, bipartisan consensus, and in large part a union busting.
Yeah, I wonder. What comes to your? Do you feel? I feel like there's a little bit of frustration here from the Kyle Kristol side of the idea of incrementalism. I feel like sometimes people just say this to mean it didn't do enough that I want. And in my opinion, listening to that change in the idea that if you get caught union busting, that the union just has to be insta-recognized, that's like unbelievably huge. That's insignificant. That the worry that it's just that you're going to be busted and you're going to be fired is like the biggest fear that people have starting a union. That seems like a pretty if that's incremental, what do we mean by incremental? What do you think about that? Do you think that it's sort of still a useful phrase?
Incrementalism?
Well, just sort of just that I would maybe not the phrase, but just that mindset, viewing something like the labor board changes as being incremental. Obviously, in some sense, they are, in that they're not a revolution, but they're also a significant change to what Democrat policy and even the Obama administration was.
Did she? Okay, and maybe I missed it, but did she say specifically that was incremental, or did she say, or was? Because what I got from it was that she was saying that's a significant change, but that does not mean that the Democratic Party as a whole has changed their stance. That there has been a shift away from labor, and Biden has made a good appointment They've made a good decision, and that decision is not even in place. The summits decision is what we're talking about. That it's not even in place yet, is my understanding. Like that is like that's not indicative of some major shift. You know, that's what I got from that.
I did. Yeah, I mean, yes, I would agree. That's the reading. But I would say that just seems to be like an incorrect reading of it, right? I mean, pushing for something like that, and the labor policies with which the Biden administration has pursued. I'm not the biggest. I'm not as educated on this as I probably should be to be making this argument. But I don't know. This seems like a big step up from what Hillary was promising, what many of the other candidates during 2020 were promising, and what the Obama administration's reaction to 2008 was.
But like, is it so? It seems like what Brianna Joy Gray is trying to do is make a distinction between Biden himself and what he's asked for, what he's been pushing for, what he's campaigned on, and his labor relations board. Like I said at the very start, he's made like two, maybe three, but at least two, good appointments. The NLRB and the FTC. It's made those really good appointments, and they're like making waves. But is that indicative of what Biden wants, right? Specifically, is this like if Biden? So if Biden was the head of those boards, he'd be doing that? Like do we have an indication that this is something that he would do, or did he just make interesting picks?
I mean, I would definitely say if it's not that, if Biden doesn't really necessarily care about these and he's just listening, he's kind of going with his advisors and stuff. The claim we're trying to figure out is: has there been a change in the Democratic Party establishment towards their view of labor? If the argument being posited is that Biden is just listening to the Democratic establishment, he does that. He picks pro-labor appointments. Seems to be at least maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I don't think he did listen to the Democratic side. I don't think there's no way that this NLRB pick was pushed forward by the Democratic establishment. That's why I said at the very beginning that it's likely that this was a push from the Bernie wing. There's no way. And the FTC chair.
Well, then could you just just what the argument? When the argument just be then, if that's what the view would be, that this is a effect of the Bernie wing, then the demonstration that there is such a thing as the Bernie wing, and that wing has influence so much that appointments are being influenced by their advice, is that would be what the Crystal Kyle side would point to as significant more than just incremental change.
So I don't know, and I guess it's just like maybe it's a
if there's a new wing,
it's a shift. Hold on, I think it's a shift in perspective. Because my perspective is that Bernie had this one moment of leverage, and he used that one moment of leverage, being when he getting out of the race and endorsing Biden. And he got stuff out of it. I think he probably could have got more out of it, but whatever, right? He got stuff out of that. And I don't know this for sure. Okay, so I just be very clear. Like, I'm not making this as a solid claim, but like, it seems to me that this FTC chair and this NLRB and pick, right? like that pick, that seems like they were influenced by Bernie. Like, these are the exact type of things that Bernie would like put his thumb on the scale for, right? Okay, but that's a moment in time by a politician who otherwise doesn't have very much sway in the Democratic Party organization. So, if the question is, has the Democratic Party organization had a shift? Well, it was influenced. Like I said, it's not like they're immune to outside influences. Sure, Bernie had his pick and that one moment in time, but like, what are the larger policies? What is the larger platform of Democrats? What are they pushing for? Like, has any of the inputs to the Democratic Party actually changed? And I think that their stranglehold that the donors have on them, and the neoliberal realignment, the Clinton neoliberal realignment, I don't think that's moved much at all. Maybe it's moved a tiny bit, and that's enough. but I don't think it's actually moved much at all here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how I would convince you from my perspective. I guess to me it seems as if Biden is if the fact that we kind of all agree there's such a thing as the progressive wing of the Democratic Party now, even if it is tiny and a little fledgling wing, that it exists, that it has influence, we can see the influence of that wing. That itself, I think, is especially if we're going to take the perspective that the Democratic Party is a much more conservative organization than it kind of presents itself to be. That seems to be a big leap in the right direction. And I think that's what many people, not everybody, obviously many people are sympathetic to Brianna, but I think that's what many people look to when they're judging whether something is incremental.
Yeah,
Is whether or not it's a big leap in the right forward or in the right direction.
yeah. I think a big leap would be, I think examples of a big leap would be a big policy change, right? Pushed forward by the Democratic Party as an organization, not simply by a rogue or two rogue administration picks, right?
What
Like
would
what? Because I'll give you an example, right? So like, if because what the CEMEX is being called, right, is card check light, right? Card check is something the unions have been asking for. It's I don't want to try to like relate the details of the policy because I feel like I'm going to get it wrong. But in any case, it's something that the unions have wanted. And the CEMEX thing that Crystal was just referring to, that is something similar to that, but just like not as extensive. This is what the NLRB can do under current law. At least they think they can. This hasn't been challenged in court yet. This is as much as they can push forward. What would be better would be card check, which would be like an act of Congress, right? Obama said he was going to do this, right? He campaigned that he was going to make it happen. As far as I know, didn't even fucking bother, right? And so, like, if I saw within the Senate or the House, right? Well, no, it can't be either or. It has to be both. That it has a chance of passing, and that the Democrats actually make an effort to make it pass. That would be a shift for me. That'd be a major shift if they actually push for that, right? And the reason why I say it can't be just be one or the other, because Democrats do signaling legislation all the time, right? Where basically they know it's going to die in the Senate or vice versa. And so now they'll all vote for it. So it's on their record. Look, I voted for this thing that you liked. But the moment that it actually has a chance to pass, meaning they have both chambers, then all of a sudden there's a problem and we just can't make it happen. So it has to have a chance to pass, because I've seen that game the Democrats play. It has to have the chance to pass, and we have to actually push for it. And then I would say, yes, this is a big shift of the party. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, I definitely understand the perspective. I guess I see it as, we're applying different rulers, I guess. Your ruler is going to say it's not a big jump. A different ruler would say it is a big jump. I would wonder, though, do you see sort of the logic with which somebody who views such a change as being big, do you see like where they're coming from? Or do you think that they're missing something? Or do you think that it's, as I said, we're applying different rulers to the same thing?
One second. Change box. Hello, hi. Thank you so much for gifting a sub. To Saawi PhD. Hello, hi. Thank you for being here, Saawi, and thank you for being here, Change box. So thanks for being so kind to about the channel, gifting us stuff like that. It means a lot. Really do appreciate your kindness. Yeah, just so you know, hype chat, super chats, if you want to get your comments read, we will read them out. Be sure to read them out if you use our hype chat, super chat function. So sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yeah. Do you think that do you think that it is simply a matter of perspective that that leads somebody like a Crystal to make the argument she's making, that she views these things as being substantial and you don't? or do you think that there's an error in their thinking? They're not looking at this correctly, or
Ah.
they're simply looking at this at like a reasonably valid perspective, but just a different
um, that's a good question, Kobe. A really good question. I, mm, I think it's a reasonable position to take. Like I had a strong reaction to you saying it, but I think it's reasonable to have arrived at that conclusion, seeing like coming out of an administration, these changes, like that seems reasonable. Uh, mm, it would be reasonable. It's reasonable that they made that error. So like, but I think maybe they're missing each other. That's why I think they're having the same discussion that we were having just now, and that I'm talking about and Brianna's talking about the Democratic Party itself as an organization writ large, and they're talking about these like different policies that came out not of the president, right? I don't see the president going out and pushing those policies that they're talking about, right? Like the Semix one. I don't. As far as that could be wrong, but I don't know if he's even mentioned that, right? If he's like gotten behind, like this is something that like my pick for the NLRB did, and I'm fully behind it. Let's go. Let's get this done, right? For unions. I haven't seen him do that. If he has, then I apologize. That would be something else, right? But they're like, well, these picks that he's done, like that's a indicative of a wider shift, and I don't think that's what she's talking about. So,
I mean, I definitely. It's just I don't know. I would say it's a different, just applying different rulers. Rulers like measuring sticks. If what you're looking for is just like a larger, looking to see the DNC change within the DNC, in my personal opinion, it's going to be there are going to be more and more of these rogue elements of the Democrat. What happens when a bunch of rogues get together and they stop being a rogue and they start just being a normal, they start, they start just being a representative of the group. And I think we're already seeing that with the Progressive Caucus or whatever it's called. Like the fact that exists is a demonstration of this change. And I think that it's just, perhaps maybe what
I
someone
guess
like
I'm looking for consensus, and you're saying like, well, we have some upstarts, right? And I think
that's how consensus changes, though. The way the consensus changes is that there at first is a minority position. That minority position more and more gains popularity until it becomes sort of accepted alternative view, and then when it is a accepted alternative view, can it then kind of overtake the status quo?
I hear you, and so I am grateful for the upstarts, right? I'm glad that they're there. I'm glad that they're having some level of effect. I hope they have more in effect. I hope eventually the consensus changes, but the consensus has not changed yet.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
But the fact that we're even, the fact that this is even, we're even having this conversation, many people just view that as a significant improvement.
Okay. All right. So leave it alone. Just continue.
Consensus. Also don't acknowledge that there actually has been a notable shift in the Biden administration. Now, my big issue with the Biden administration, I mean, there's a million of them, right? On foreign policy, I've got problems. But my biggest issue economically with the Biden administration is the way they've allowed the pandemic relief, the short-term pandemic relief programs to fall away and leave a lot of ordinary Americans in a more precarious financial position now than they were at the beginning of the administration. And that's not nothing. But when I look at the long term, when I look at the fact that, listen, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the CHIPS Act, with infrastructure investment, you're talking about industrial policy in a way that would have been completely unheard of in the Clinton-Obama era. When you look at not just the NLRB, which I said is like the core for me, but also his antitrust appointments and the fact they're really trying to reverse decades of neoliberal attack.
That's the FTC pick that I'm talking about. So, yeah, and they're doing great work. Shout out to them.
On any sort of trust busting. I feel like none of those improvements that have made Biden on that front way better than Obama, way better than Clinton. I just feel like there's no willingness to acknowledge any of that whatsoever.
I don't think the issue is acknowledging it. It's how much it matters to you, how weighty that is to you, and how much you see those kind of call them meaningful improvements as really core to the nature of the project that you're on. And I think that what some people are frustrated by is that this went from feeling like, in both left media and left politics, a bigger revolutionary project that was going to the core of our capitalist system and wanting to radically change the way that human lives are valued, what we consider to be the nature of our social safety net, what we believe to be the nature of what we consider to be human rights. And they wanted to join a movement that validated what many of us felt intrinsically, emotionally for most of our lives, that something in the milk very much wasn't clean. And Bernie came along and articulated that it was legitimate for us to be asking for something more.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, it does feel as though there has been a kind of a bait and switch. It's not that what you're describing isn't true or legitimate. And I said this on my podcast. If your priorities are what you have kind of articulated your priorities as being, I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument. But I have to hold space for the fact that for many people, it simply is inadequate.
Wait, can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me jump in here. So my issue is that many people on the left are, I would say, dishonestly refusing to acknowledge any good things that were done. We could all on the left list, like, here's the 57 things we hate that Biden did. But when something good happens, I'm the only one talking about it, and then I get accused of being a DNC shill. Now, I'm not like, look, I'm not blind. I think in order to be intellectually honest, you have to look at, here's the good things that happen, here's the bad thing that happened. I'm going to give them all to you, and then you could judge how much you value each and which one you weigh more and how that factors into your like voting analysis. But I was like the poster boy back in the day, or people viewed me this way, as like he's the purity tester. He's like the main purity tester guy.
Yep.
I feel like I'm risking opening us up to another 10-minute dialogue here. I think Brianna hit something very interesting here. Very, very interesting here. I think she is very correct that there were a lot of people that saw the reaction to Trump and thought, as she said, that there was this sort of that there was some percentage of the people, the progressive wing, that have this intuitive feeling that the system of capitalism is just inherently unjust, that everything about it just kind of, well, not everything, obviously, not some straw man, but that there's just, as she says, there's something wrong in the milk or whatever. There's something wrong in the stew, and they can always taste it. And that many people felt as if that other people were feeling this, and that feeling was going to have voice in the Democratic Party. And I would probably say that is a little foolish. We live in America. We live in the heart of the capitalist empire. Even the super duper, there are very few people that are like actual hardcore communists. Vast majority of people are like libertarian socialists who do market, they advocate for like unions and sort of what's, democracy in the workplace, these kind of things. We benefit living in America. You benefit from America. We all agree, at least a leftist critique of this. We all benefit from being part, the center of the international economic system. And in order for us to truly leave capitalism, we would have to change that. And there's a reason why a lot of these far left, more far left groups have been talking about things like degrowth, because you're not, that's, it's not complete one or the other. Socialism is when no toothbrush. I'm not trying to say that, but you can't have, the types of lives that most people in America live and have, an actual, as she says, completely change the superstructure of society. Most people benefit from it. They just want to benefit from it more and get rid of the things they don't benefit from. Most people don't want to completely redo society. They want to get rid of the shitty parts of it. And I think that there is a bait and switch because those people, I think there's a, as she says, you're following your intuition. Not everybody has the same intuition. Most people are sympathetic to communism, not because of deep-seated morals, but because it benefits, a more socialist society would benefit them more. But they're only going to go into the benefit to them stops.
So you're saying that their commitment to the socialist revolution is insofar that they get health care, not insofar that they upend the imperial regime that that puts us at a center, that allows us to power our economy through like that foreign exploitation, which gives us the economic ability to provide that healthcare in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, what politician on earth could possibly argue that we would have, you're going to be, we're not going to have as much access to the global market, that you're going to expect less, not necessarily less, not less food necessarily, but it's like, less of an ability to engage. We benefit from it the most. That's, it's an unequal exchange. We get more out of these countries than we give to these countries. We in America would experience quality of life reductions in the same way that we saw that during the pandemic, where global trade slowed down. That's what would happen. And I think that the idea that as Brianna said, that there was going to be I do not think there's going to be this intuition that many of socialists truly do feel, that there's just something wrong with the way we've structured society. We live in the heart of empire.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be realistic. You know what I mean? If that's reality,
I totally hear you.
If that's reality, it needs to not be the Trumps in power, because the Trumps are going to be supporting the Bolsonaros. They're going to be supporting the Dutertes. They're going to be killing the Soleimanis, and they're going to be doing things that they're going to cause the real demons of this imperial order, which I would be I'm speaking metaphorically, fascism. That's what's going to bring it about. And the idea that people are going to choose over, if the choices are an ultra chauvinism, an ultra patriotism in the face of economic scarcity, or they're going to choose to overthrow the whole system. Like, let's get real here.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're far enough down the line of I don't know if the conversation that voters are grappling with, that the Overton window is far enough down the line that this is a concern of theirs, right? I think what you're talking about is an interesting concern for the future, right? What is this socialist revolution going to look like, right, when you are the heart of empire, right? As you've said. I think it's a really interesting question, and one I want to that I've been trying to grapple with, that people have and not in these words, but have thrown something similar in my face, and I've not been able to respond, right? But I don't think that's what people are looking at. So when they're looking at these choices, I think they're looking at precursor to fascism. They're looking at status quo, a defender with a little bit of improvements along the edges, the democratic special, right? And then and then finally they're looking at I get better healthcare, or there's a change in how we treat the minorities, right? I don't think they're thinking of upending the entire world order. And it's not clear to me that even Cornel West is run that way, right? He's talking about revolution, but I feel like it's a revolution that's localized at this point, rather than okay, well, here are my plans to re-engineer the global order. I don't know. What do you think?
I completely agree with you. You are correct. The problem is the Briannas of the world have deluded themselves into believing that the people actually unironically want, as she says, a reimagining of the whole system. People do not want a reimagining of their whole system. They want to reshuffle the system. It's more equal, as you say, so the negative externalities, the rough edges, are sanded off. That's what I would say.
Well, no. But she's also talking about specific. No, remember though, right? Let's not. I
want to be fair to her. So if I'm misunderstanding,
because she is talking about a very specific cohort, right? She's saying, I'm making space for those who actually are
those people. Those people are fools. That is foolish. To think we're going to be in America, and that your people in America, growing up in America, are going to want to have completely overthrow all hitherto existing society. No. The most you're going to be able to get them is, as you say, social progressivism, sexual liberation, and democracy in the workplace. Those are, in my opinion, stuff.
you're widening the scope of the argument. That's the problem, right? So like,
Oh.
yeah, you can decide if you like, that can be your opinion, right? That those people are foolish and whatnot. But like
Yeah.
the scope of this argument is whether like, for like a progressives talking to like hardcore leftists, right?
Mhm.
Like between them, what is our strategy? For the primary and for the general election, right? And what would be the best use of our left vote? That's it, right? Rather than necessarily taking this to like overall, like for what is the leftist strategy for like an arc, right? Like an arc of time. It's just like what's the strategy should be electorally for this moment, you know?
Yeah, I get her. I get it. And again, I want to be very clear.
Mm.
I would not phrase what I just said if I was talking to a person that was more sympathetic to this, because I get why they would say this, and I'm simply, I've read the literature. I get why somebody would have that vision of the world, right? But I would just say it's. I don't know. I get what you're saying. I rambled a lot, but I get what you're saying. I think it's like I don't know. It is true that there are more of those people than there used to be 10 years ago, and that they need to be taken seriously. And I think that's what Brianna is saying. That they can't simply be called fools, and they're not fools for noticing that there is a bait and switch, because there is a bait and switch.
Crystal clear. All right, thank you so much for or crystal clear, because I'm still used to your old name. But thank you for resubbing for your so many months. Much appreciated, friend. Okay, let's get back to it.
Guy. And I didn't vote for Biden in 2020 because I didn't think he would pass my purity test. Now, at the time, people could go back and watch the video. My purity test was super fucking lenient. It was like, if I'm convinced you're going to do like 2 or 3 of the things that I value highly, then I would vote for you. Because I know it's basically down to just the Democrat and the Republican, no matter how much we want to wish the Green Party or Libertarians want to wish the Libertarian Party into existence. And so when I look at the record, again, I could list all the bad things, but she just mentioned the NLRB raising overtime pay, or you mentioned the thing where, they automatically recognize the union if the bosses try to bust it up. There's also the overtime pay rule where now it's not $33,000, it's about $55,000 a year, where now you get overtime pay. That's a huge, huge change. Student loan debt reduction, and even Biden coming back after the Supreme Court tried to slap it down, and he said, no, I'm going to try to do it through the Higher Education Act now. There's little things we could go after him. Oh, the interest rate. Yes, that's bad. I agree with you on that. But we got to recognize that that is, all things considered, a step in the right direction. Pulling out of Afghanistan, he actually had the balls to do it, even when the media was shitting on him relentlessly. And I didn't see anybody on the left coming into his defense at that point in
I saw
time.
a lot of people
I was like the only fucking one. It was like me and Matt Iglesias.
I definitely defended him.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, then it's like 3 people. I didn't, and all these, oh, I'm so anti-war. He pulls out of Afghanistan, and it gets messy, because that's what happens when you pull out.
Did you say pause?
Yeah. Sorry. Well, do you have strong feelings on the Afghanistan issue?
Oh,
Like,
pulling out?
what like his pullout?
I am in. So I am mostly in favor, right? Of the Afghanistan pullout. I am not necessarily in favor of how it's done. And I guess my only other reservation is either do it, either pull out or stay for like a century, like,
Yeah, I mean, the more that I have a really strong feeling that there's something extraordinarily evil about, and I'm using, obviously that's a loaded term, but morally bad or whatever, not good for America to go into a country so radically commit to changing that society, creating a democratic society out of a relatively decentralized tribal society, and then it becomes politically unpopular and you pull out. And you pull out so much that people are hanging on to planes. So much so that there are military guys handing babies over. That is an unbelievable, to reduce a civilization to that level of humiliation is something that we would view ancient barbarian empires of doing. You know what I mean? Where the Romans, they sack the barbarian city and the women are wading in the water. That's what they used to do. We did that to Afghanistan. That is not, I think that the fact that Biden gets credit for that, I get why. I get it. You know what I mean? I get from a political perspective, it probably is a good political move. From geopolitics, and from morals, it's yeah, and that's something that weighs pretty heavily in my support of Biden.
Okay. Uh, so I was in favor of going in Afghanistan in the first place, right? I said, and I've been saying this for a long time since I've been into like politics, right? Whenever my political awakening is that if 9/11 was a police, not a act of war, right? It was a criminal act, and that criminal act deserved police action. And so it needed a much smaller response than we did. In fact, we literally like played into Osama bin Laden's hands by invading, right? That was his goal, and we fell hook, line, and sinker for it. And in fact, we were happy to do so in terms of our administrations because, hey, then our defense contractor friends became very rich, and we America loves the business of war. So I don't think we should have gone in the first place. I think there were other ways to handle that. But beyond that, once we did go in, right? I think it should have been like we shouldn't have tried to nation build. We should have gone in, done our business, and gone out with like the least amount of damage. But we didn't do that. Then we decided, I guess we'll just like stick around here, right? Because like how it was sold to the American people is that this is going to be a quick thing, right? And I, I, I think the military planners at the time and the Bush administration thought that was the case, especially for Iraq. They definitely thought that was going to be the case. But then when it wasn't, there was like, we don't really know what to do. And so then we like half commit to that project that you're talking about of making it a democratic state. But like we were never fully in, and we were never sold this, and people were never on board, right? They adopted the idea, and it's really funny, of women's rights, right? And it's just funny for lots of reasons, because it was such like this like cynical like deployment of this idea that like the Afghanis themselves got that, and so they realized that if you want to please the Americans or the Westerners in general, but especially the Americans, like you're going for a job, right? Like you will see Afghani men saying, "And I believe in women's rights," right? Just fit that anywhere, fit it anywhere. That was just the advice that they were given. Right? Just say that.
Not only this is it was a we could go on a diatribe for this for a long time. We probably have a lot of agreement here, but can you imagine trying to be an Afghan feminist now in a post-invasion world where any argument you make in your favor, you're a CIA. The only reason you believe what you believe is because the Americans, you're colonized. You're colonized. The entire project of a Western conception of equality of the sexes is going to be, for a very long time, tainted as being a remnant of 20 years of American occupation, and there will be that argument in the sort of cultural unconsciousness of Afghan society that move towards that direction. Is a move away, move towards this type. Again, as they view it in the same way. We let Osama bin Laden win. They would be letting the Americans win. That's something that at least I've read a lot in a lot of the discussions of, for example, the rejection in Iran when they had their revolution and they rejected a lot of the more Western secularism, Western women's rights. A lot of the same kind of idea that Iranian feminists were labeled as being tools of Western imperialism. That the way that the West is going to come in and subvert these other ways of doing it. And we did that to that society in a way that so much.
And Afghani feminists never stood a chance. Like once we invaded, because like even in the American regime, like we didn't actually listen to what the Afghani feminists wanted, right? We wanted to impose our ideal of Western feminism. It's a very white feminist view of things, and well, this is how it kind of evolved in our country, so this is how it should be evolved in your country. But the Afghani feminists were asking for different things, right? And they were just like being marginalized then. Look, again, we didn't commit to this. This wasn't our plan. And so since we never committed, and like this was going to end this way, one way or the other, right? Eventually we're just going to draw down to the point of just like quietly leaving, or unless there was some sort of another Middle Eastern attack, and then we would have an intense focus on Afghanistan and using Afghanistan to launch attacks in some other Middle Eastern country, right? Like, unless that happened, we're just going to just quietly draw down. Well, I guess the other option would have been, yeah. So look, I understand that if you're going to actually commit to this project, we have to just acknowledge, and no one was going to be able to sell this, that it has to be this. We have to stay there for a century, right? It's generation after generation. A few generations of Afghanis have to live and die, and then flip over for this to be permanent. We weren't going to do that. And then, but beyond there, I've heard like we could have just done it with a light footprint, but I just don't know how presidents would have like. The only way we could have done it is by literally completely ignoring Afghanistan. But as long as anyone died there, right, that would have just kept reminding us, oh, we're still there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Out of wars, and all of a sudden, oh my God, it's
I thought that
the
was
end of the
actually a
world.
good moment for the left. I saw a lot of consensus. Good on you, because we almost resented and kind of were enjoying the extent to which he was getting, dogpiled by the mainstream media, and we were the only ones defending him. So I would quibble with that a little bit. But
I didn't see much defending him. I really didn't.
Kyle, what people are responding to, if I can offer this, is not the idea that you are accurately describing advancements, good things that Joe Biden is doing. I think you could also say Obama did some good things.
No, Biden is way better than Obama, not even close.
That's not the point I'm making. It's
Okay.
not that one is better than the other. You could also sit here and say Obama did good things. Now, the way you bristled at me saying that, I could say, oh, why won't you just acknowledge that Obama did good things? The same way that you're saying that leftists won't acknowledge, they bristle when you acknowledge that Biden did good things. And it's because we have different standards and we're making different kinds of comparisons.
But that's not my issue, because they're not even acknowledging the good things, is my point. I have a list of 47 things here, and I've heard nobody talk about any of them.
But let me get to the core of this point. The reason that people are frustrated with that kind of analysis is because it's been used for so long by liberals to justify why people shouldn't be asking for more. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. But if you bring up something like student debt, when the consensus of all of the student experts that I've talked to on my podcast, people from the Debt Collective, the Asher Taylors of the world, the legal experts I've brought on, is that there was a path toward doing this, to canceling all student debt, that would not have been stymied by the Supreme Court. The same authority that Donald Trump used to enact the student debt moratorium, which has been ongoing until beginning of this month for the last 3 years, was the same authority that he could have canceled all student debt with a stroke of a pen. He chose not to do that because he decided to means test the program. He circulated those documents. I got one in my inbox last August, I believe it was, to see if you qualify for student debt. It was a very easy form. But when he did that, that started the clock for people to be able to challenge it in court, which 6 states did, 2 of them were successful, and now here we are today. Not only did he decline to do the unstoppable mechanism to actually cancel all student debt, he additionally chose to use a legal authority, which when many legal experts said was the most vulnerable one. So you're now saying,
No.
he could have used the Higher Education Act.
He did. He did. He invoked it.
He could have done that in the first instance.
But he didn't, and now he tried it again through the Higher Education Act. The idea that it's a conspiracy, he doesn't want to actually cancel it. No, he appealed the case like 4 or 5 times.
Kyle,
and then at the end of it, when the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, he said, fuck you, I can. And he did the Higher Education Act. That's exactly what we wanted him to do. Then he does it, and people go, oh, that's not good enough. And it's like, that's ridiculous.
There, Kyle, what we wanted him to do was first and foremost, just cancel the student debt.
No. I expected him to do nothing on student debt. This is the point I'm trying to get across to you, is that I expected nothing from Biden, and he did way more than I expected. So let's be honest about that.
It's not about your expectations. We have different expectations.
Of course I'm going to talk about it through my expectations. I'm me.
But I want to pivot this conversation a little bit, because what we really have is a tactical disagreement. We could quibble about student loan debt. We could quibble about all kinds of aspects of the Biden administration. All of us would like him to do more. There's no doubt about that. But hold on a second. Our political aims are ultimately very similar. But I do think the student loan debt example is instructive, because it shows what has been effective in terms of securing real gains versus what has been ineffective. Jill Stein running in 2016, I don't think she was a spoiler, but the Democratic Party thinks she was a spoiler. They put that out to the public. So in the theory of change where a third party would force all of this revolutionary change on the Democratic Party, that should have worked. But instead, it served to allow the Democratic Party to basically demonize and dismiss third party efforts, and then they prop up Joe Biden. So that definitely didn't work. However,
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I'm going to let her finish, but I want to respond to what she's saying.
the fact that Joe Biden had to be on a primary debate stage versus Bernie and Marianne and a whole lot of Elizabeth Warren, a whole lot of other people who were pushing him on student loan debt cancellation, forced him into a position of doing something when he 100% would have done nothing otherwise. And we can see that now because, the fact that they've basically blocked any sort of real democratic process within the Democratic primary has made it possible for him to literally promise nothing for this next term thus far. So you can see how the third party effort was not successful in bringing about whatever revolutionary change people want to see. And the process that Bernie engaged in and that Marianne Williamson is engaging in now was far more effective in actually delivering results. And that's what I'm focused on.
So
To vote for Cornel West.
fuck.
I share his politics.
Shit.
to you.
I
How much
clicked on the wrong. I was trying to click on the video itself, and then I'll find where we were left off. But anyway,
I agree with that, I would say.
Yeah, so I thought she was making a different point, but I end up agreeing more or less. But I agree that what she's saying, and let's see if you agree with my synopsis here, is that within the confines of the Democratic Party of their primaries, there was the push and pull of the leftist wing and the corporatist wing, and the leftist wing was put pressure on Biden to go farther than he ever would have, right? The Bernie wing that you and I have been discussing, they pushed him on this, and so it did result in a more left-leaning policies out of the Biden administration than would have happened otherwise, right? So she's saying that was successful, and that having Jill Stein within a third party, outside, didn't actually affect anything in terms of change. And so I guess I would. So first of all, do you agree with that synopsis?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I cannot name a single policy platform at all of Jill Stein at all, and multiple of the policy platforms of Bernie have now become part of the Democratic platform. So yeah, I would I would completely agree with this consent with this narrative.
Yeah, I guess if I was Brianna, I'd say sure, that is a pressure point, and we're happy to see that do something, but we would want additional pressure points. That and to do that would require us to put effort into building up these third parties. That you can say that it was ineffective previously, but it's ineffective until it's effective. Until we have it reaches a critical mass. We're not there, that critical mass. You're telling us don't ever bother trying to build that critical mass. It's a waste of time to do such a thing. And
I think a better argument. Well, I think my response would be there needs to be a certain atmosphere which a critical mass can be built, and that atmosphere, there needs to be first enough people in the DNC and the Democratic Party that would even begin to support the idea of changing some of these the ways that states do elections, so that ranked choice voting could have more and more representation for there to even get to the place where a third party could matter. We're not even there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. So that's my critique of third parties. And I talked to you about this before, and that I feel like they haven't laid the groundwork. At least the Green Party hasn't laid the groundwork. And I'm not sure about the Libertarian Party. Maybe they've done a better job. I don't know. But it has to start from the bottom up, not the top down. You can't be putting all this effort into getting a presidential candidate, right? Because that person needs infrastructure behind them, a party that can actually support him and get his policy pushed, or at least can make enough trouble for the Democrats that the Democrats would do it. And so,
exactly. Also, like that seems to be what Brianna is advocating for. I think that both of us agree that's not going to happen. The closest thing that's going to happen is with the Republicans and Trump, is if Trump ran as a third party. That's the closest political situation to something like that happening. There's no left-wing Trump who could do a crazy, again, Cornel West. Like, come on, let's be honest here.
All right, let me see if I can find where we were at. I'm sorry, guys. I clicked him.
I think we were around the 13 mark. We were
Okay.
ending our each here. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, let's take a look.
But when something good happens, I put the Easter boy back in the day, anti-test. Now, if I'm convinced you're going to do like 2 or 3 of the things that I value highly, then I would vote for you. Because I know it's basically down to just the Democrat and the Republican, no matter how much we want to wish the Green Party or libertarians want to wish the Libertarian Party into existence. And so when I look at the record, again,
Yeah.
mentioned the thing where over now it's not the have it down. And he said, no, I'm going to try to do it through the Higher Education Act now.
Yeah, I think this was farther here.
Decades of neoliberal attack on any sort of trust busting. I feel like none of those improvements that have made Biden on that front way better than Obama, way better than Clinton. I just feel like there's no willingness to acknowledge any of that whatsoever.
No, Biden is way better than Obama, not even close.
I don't
That's
know
not
where
the
we're
point
at.
I'm making. It's
Okay.
not that one is better
yeah,
than the
so-
other. You could also
ahead.
sit here and say Obama did good things. Now,
Yeah.
the way you bristled at me saying
Okay,
that,
here
I
it
could
is.
I state that he not only needed to win for the presidency, but needed to win for the Senate, and where there are 3 of the major HBCUs in the United States.
Can
Oh, right
see
here.
how the third-party
There we
effort
go.
was not
Found it. Sorry,
successful in
guys.
bringing
I'm
about
sorry.
whatever revolutionary change people want to see. And the process that Bernie engaged in and that Marianne Williamson is engaging in now was far more effective in actually delivering results. And that's what I'm focused on.
So, first of all, you, I think, are both fundamentally, dramatically overestimating and overstating and giving way too much credit in that you can make your labor point, the student debt point, absolutely not. Joe Biden promised and coerced people to the polls by saying he was going to cancel at least $10,000 of everybody's student loan debt, and moreover, cancel all student loan debt for graduates of HBCUs. And he went down to Georgia, a state that he not only needed to win for the presidency, but needed to win for the Senate, and where there are 3 of the major HBCUs in the United States of America, made that promise, and people knocked doors and turned people out to the polls on the basis of that promise, which he immediately stopped talking about the second he got elected and reneged upon. He also knew the authority that he had to cancel all student debt. And I know because all of these student debt advocates have been talking about how they were directly liaising with his office and communicating these points, and they chose to ignore them and do a plan that he knew could be obstructed. You can say it's not a conspiracy theory, that's conspiratorial thinking, but it's either a conspiracy or he's an idiot. Those are the options. And I'm not especially comfortable in validating either of those things. Now, you were saying that you were looking through the prism of your own perspective.
No, I was saying I expected nothing from him, like we all expected nothing from him.
Absolutely not. The people that he
I
promised.
expected
Wait, I'm
nothing
sorry,
from
wait a
him.
minute.
I expected nothing of Joe Biden. He was the guy who brought us NAFTA. He's the guy who brought us the Iraq War. He's the guy who wrote the Patriot Act, who wrote the
When
crime bill.
a
I expected
presidential-
nothing of him.
When a presidential candidate makes a promise to people and lies to them in order to get them to go to the polls, I believe it's my job as a member of independent media to make it clear so that people don't fall for those kinds of mistakes going forward. People, if Biden wants to run as I'm a milquetoast incrementalist who's just better than Trump, he can feel free to do that all day and night, and then he would have lived up to the expectations that he set for himself in the context
He
of a
did
primary
run like
campaign.
that, though. He did
No.
run as a milquetoast.
He promised to cancel all student debt for every graduate of an HBCU and $10,000 to $20,000 of student debt for people who earn less than $125,000 a year. Now, that might not matter to you, and I defend you guys against claims that, you don't care about this stuff because, you're out of touch and it doesn't affect you and material. I think that some of those claims get really silly and overly personalized. But Biden made a choice to tell 44 million Americans who have student debt that he was not only going to not fulfill his promise to them, but that in the middle of the debt ceiling argument of a couple of months ago, the one thing that he was going to bargain away to get the debt ceiling passed was ending the student loan moratorium. So now it's not me. I'm not the one in control of whoever votes. He has to make the case to those 44 million Americans who's he's starting their student debt up. Right? Months
Is
before
the
an
plan
election.
stronger
Hold
or
on,
weaker
hold
than
on.
what you expected? Because it's
But
way stronger
hold
than what I
on,
expected.
hold on.
Way weaker than what I expected.
Well, I
the
expected
question
nothing
is-
from him on
but the-
student
the
debt.
real-
Yeah.
Nothing.
I'm sorry. Just like Kyle, and I've said this before to you in private. Like I thought, like Kyle was just like so obtuse and like he made this conversation so much difficult, and I think it would have been just more conducive if it was just Crystal and Brianna, right? Like, he's like, well, I expected nothing, like, just from my perspective. And what Brianna is talking about, like, a wider strategy, and he's like, well, he exceeded my expectations. Well, okay, well, then you can vote the way you want to, right? She's not telling him, you gotta vote this way. She's saying that, I'm sympathetic to others who are looking at it a different way, and I'm, like, presenting their arguments to you. But he's like, but it's really annoying. I'm sorry.
I definitely get that. I suppose I think part of the indignation comes from the fact that there's a feeling from someone like Kyle that it's like, again, it's not just that there's a disagreement of what we're looking at, or of what we're measuring, rather, as she keeps saying, they weigh things differently, but that there's a disagreement about whether or not people are weighing things rationally. He views Biden as being someone who's much more conservative, and he has the level of expectations that a reasonable person should have, he believes, of a Biden presidency has been significantly overstepped by the actual Biden presidency. And it seems like, in my opinion, Brianna's kind of making at least maybe I'm incorrectly noticing this, but it feels like there's a little bit of a contradiction. At once, she's hypercritical of the DNC and views the DNC as much more holding their feet, dragging their feet than the other side does. Yet she's also saying that what she expected out of Biden was what he promised. Wouldn't it be logical from her position to assume that Biden is going to be sort of second-handed and underhanded with his promises? And isn't from her own perspective it a little silly for her to assume that when he says he's going to do X, Y, and Z with student loans, he's going to? Shouldn't she, as Kyle says, assume that's going to be not the case and then be surprised when it's at least $10,000 mean tested?
Oh, hold on. All right. Wait, what? Seems like a weird argument to me. You're saying...
Look, could I rephrase it? Because I think I was kind of like phrasing it. If she believes that Joe Biden, which I'm believing she would agree, that Joe Biden and the Democrats are more conservative than they present themselves. They present themselves as being more liberal than they really are. That they are more hostile to the progressive wing. They're more hostile to these ideas. They simply say these things so that they can get elected. Right? If that is her assumption of the party, then wasn't it foolish, as she says? She says, oh, I assumed he was going to do what he says. Is that not foolish on her part?
Oh, like...
She agrees that they're being... She believes they're double-handed. She believes that they're pretending to be progressive just to win elections. Why would she ever assume Biden would follow through on this? Shouldn't she be with Kyle's camp?
No. I understand what you're trying to say, but no, she's of the expectation that the Democratic Party should follow through with these things, right? Or that's the stance that she's trying, that's the bar that she wants them to clear, that they should pass these. She assumes otherwise. I'm putting words in her mouth, but I believe she assumes otherwise. But she expects them, like, for her like full-throated support. This is the bar you have to get past, and they failed to get past that bar. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's like a.
I understand that. I would just say again, like, to expect any politician that's a pretty high bar for, in my opinion, it's a pretty high bar for a politician. Part of being a politician is compromising and changing. You know, you go into the election with one idea and it comes out the other end a different idea. That's part of what politics is, in my opinion. And the other part would be going off of your own perception of the DNC. It seems that Brianna is much more skeptical of the DNC as an organization than Crystal and Kyle. She should expect to be lied to.
And she does. And she does, and she's reacting accordingly. So I don't know what, and I hate this idea, like this convenient idea of compromise that comes up, especially when we're talking about Black issues, right? So I actually don't remember the historically Black HBCU promise that she's talking about of getting rid of all their debt. I don't remember him doing this. But I believe her. I believe her when she says it. And I also believe that the moment that he got elected, he stopped. Because that's literally what they always do. right? That's always where the compromise falls for Democrats. It's the black issues, and that I guess we can't fight for these things, right? But they'll be back in our 4 years. You can rely on it. They'll be back. They'll be back in our churches, like giving the same speeches, right? Hillary Clinton pouring out her fucking hot sauce, letting us know how black she is, right? And talking in a different way, right? Affecting like what she thinks is a black tone, a voice. They'll be back to do that, but all the time the compromises falls there, and then they expect black voters to come back every time. This is what she's getting at, like right here. It's like, no, I actually expect you, when you come into our spaces, when you demand these policies, when they get us to knock on those doors, like she was saying, right? When you do that, that you attempt to follow through. You attempt to follow through, but conveniently, all the time, always, when it comes to black issues, we have to compromise. And by compromise, I mean never talk about it again. It took 4 years.
I have a question. Would you say that this would be? Do you view this as being more so this phenomenon you're saying of compromise and where the compromise tends to land? Would you view this more so as a failure of the Democrats' application of democracy, or do you view this as being something that perhaps could be to say downfall of democracy? If you have a society with which there's a 13% minority, and that 13% minority is economically, socially disadvantaged. Part of my mind, and it's just the contrarian of me, says that's just going to be, you're going to have a hard time advocating for your issues, and the acts of compromise is many times going to land on your neck because of how at least a more traditional understanding of democracy works. Democracy is a sort of leveling of the scales between different interest groups, and the interest groups that have a lower population are going to have that compromise weighed against them.
No. Because one, they act, right? And Fanatic makes a good point of this, right? Don't get Mr. Fanatic started on this, because like he would have tore your head off just for what you just said, all right? Like, because his response would be, well, there was the Stop Asian Hate Act, right? How that passed through the Democratic Party immediately, that they made that a priority, that got through immediately. But then the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, or whatever it's called, right? Like that didn't make it. Suddenly this one, that's just too much, right? That we have, hold on, that we have a whole list of responses when it comes to other minorities, that we can find our way to respond to their needs. Much smaller minorities than us, right? When it comes to Jewish individuals, and like responding to anti-Semitism, apparently the Congress can have a whole list of responses to anyone or anything or any organization they consider to be anti-Semitic. But when it comes to black people, no. And then, like, let's not forget that black people are the reason why Democrats can be in power. Right? That we are such reliable voters. And especially black women, the most reliable voters that the Democratic Party has. And motivated, who go out there and they do that door knocking as well. Right? And we can see this again now that the Democratic Party is their hair is in a tizzy, noticing that the proportion of the black male vote is falling, right? And trying to figure out some way to do that. So, to reverse that. But here's what's going to happen. They're going to make a promise. They think that black males want to hear. They'll make a promise, and guess what will happen the moment they're elected? We'll never fucking hear about that again. And then they'll wonder the next time, as their votes continue to fall, what happened? I can't make heads or tails of it.
I'd be interested. So I'm not, again, what I'm wondering is, do you view this as an issue with the way we have our democracy set up, or do you view this as do you view this as like a problem of the way in which the Democrats use the democracy? Because the example, I think it's an interesting example, the example of the Stop Asian Hate Act. But I would wonder, in some ways, the Democratic Party is behind Asian Americans. But there's also, for example, the affirmative action issue. If Democrats are more likely to support that, Asian Americans are significantly less likely to support that. So again, that would be, I would wonder, that would be the counter example they would bring up. That the Democrats might support something like Stop Asian Hate, but then the Democrats support something like affirmative action to win minority votes, which negatively affects Asian Americans. So
I think affirmative action was a lot of status quo and easy campaigning rather than some sort of like big affirmation of it, right? I think that's an easy thing to just like say you're for rather than saying you're against, especially as the other side says it's against it, right? I don't know. So I don't know if that's like them like standing against Asians. And I don't know if how well, and I should really don't know how big of a priority it was for the Asian American community at large to get rid of affirmative action. Like I don't know. So I can't like necessarily judge that. But what I can say is that and you're asking me like, is this a failure of democracy? I think it's more of a failure of the democratic organization. I think it's a failure of the democratic organization as a whole, and I think it's a failure of the democratic base. I think Republicans. I don't know. I think Republicans are scared of their base, and so they react to their base in a way that Democrats aren't. That the Democrats are dismissive and contemptuous of their base, and they're contemptuous of black voters. They're absolutely. I mean, they can do things like kneel on a kente cloth, right? They'll do like little PR stunts, but when it actually comes down to it, and they have to balance the consideration of the Black American population, which puts them in power. Which their coalition, which is a central piece of their coalition, right? When it comes to deciding between them and then anything else, really, right? Anything of value, anything that will incur a loss, they'll never come on our side.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask this question is that this is something that I have as I look throughout different societies. This seems to be one of the best critiques of democracy. It is not just Black Americans in America. There are many different societies where there are certain setups like this. There is a politically convenient minority who is used by a larger interest group in that society in order to, sort of as you say, they use Black people to cement their rule, and then when they have the rule, they ignore that group. That's the ways that you most universally check for that. In many ways, are non-democratic, because as you say, in many ways, it's a base problem. Many people don't have a ton of care for communities that exist outside of their direct community, and they vote as such.
No, I don't. So, and maybe I should like focus. Like I think for the Democratic base, I think they've been. I think that democracy is much more than just voting, right? And I think it's about like getting involved and staying in tune with the conversation. And I think that to the benefit of those in power, that we oftentimes aren't. We don't do those things. And so like and we don't use the primary system in the way that Republicans use a primary system. Right? We aren't threatening them. I think there's so many things that go into this, right? I think we don't have the media environment that the Republicans have. So the Republicans have Fox News. They have a whole I don't want to say far right, but no, I'll say far right, like conservative media sphere, which helped galvanize their base and make them more extreme, right? And they created a monster that they realized they couldn't control later on, right? They did this for very cynical reasons, for their fucking tax breaks. So they created that monster, and now Republicans are terrified of that base. That base wants more. right? So those social issues that they use cynically to get themselves in power so that they can put in unpopular economic policies, that has turned to created a very motivated, scared base that is reactionary. On the other side, there's just not that level of energy, and we don't have a media environment, for instance, that will galvanize them and say, here's what you should be demanding, right? That you're not crazy to want these things, right? And look at how this Democratic Party has been failing, and then point out the politicians that have been a problem, and then push people to do something about it. We have nothing like that. There are so many differences between these bases, but those differences matter, and they create a Democratic Party that just really doesn't give a shit and has no reason to give a shit. And part of the one of the casualties of this is the black base. So, you want me to continue?
I know. I mean, I don't know what the answers to these are, and the reason I ask you is because I find you have an interesting perspective on these things. I want to see what you say. So, I mean, I share some of the concerns. I also, I'm also democracy is the worst system except all the other ones kind of guy. So I'm not necessarily advocating for something extra to that, but I do wonder. I guess not to stand on this too much. I do wonder. There's a deep truth. Oh, sorry.
Before you do, thank you, the Empowered Man, for gifting using Hype Chat for Super Chat. Fuck. This is YouTube. Super Chat for $5. Love to see it. And they just say, oh, you want me to say your Twitter handle? That's your Twitter handle, the Empowered Man? Okay. At the Comforter _1. So I hope you're still there. I'm sorry, I was going back and forth with my man Kobe. But at the Comforter at the Comforter _1, that is their Twitter. So shout out to them. And I hope people go check you out on Twitter. Okay, go ahead.
To stop us going on another diatribe, I liked a lot of what you said. Let's continue on with the video here.
Yeah, you and I will go forever. But I'm really enjoying this. All right, let's. What was the last thing I was said?
He's starting their student debt up. That's right. Months
is the plan stronger or weaker than what you expected? Because it's way stronger than what I expected.
Way weaker than what I expected.
I expected nothing from him on student debt. Nothing.
The real question, though, is we all want all of the debt to be canceled.
Duh. Yeah, of course.
What is the most likely path to get us there?
It's not Joe Biden, obviously.
Hold on. But I don't see how Cornel West getting 5% of the vote and unintentionally helping to reelect Trump, that doesn't get us there at all.
Let's get into that. So for
whereas
two things,
if you have a primary contender actually able face-to-face to pressure him, we have seen the way that can potentially work.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive. So why is that an argument against Cornel West?
It doesn't have to be exclusive, but do you think that the project of defeating Trump is worthwhile at all? Because I would turn back on you. You asked the question, like, where's the bottom of the lesser evil question? Like, where does that end? I would turn it back on you and say, where does it become not just a lesser evil, but like, actually, this person is significantly better? And I would say that Biden, for my disappointments with him, for all of the things that I talk about plenty, including disappointments on student loan debt, including on the pandemic relief that I talked about, including on the railway, all these things, right? Ukraine. At what point, though, do you acknowledge that this person is a lot better than Donald Trump? And so when you're in this binary choice where let's not pretend like Cornel West is going to be president of the United States, it is worth making the choice in that situation to reelect Joe Biden and get the NLRB and get the antitrust stuff and get what is at hand to be gotten in this moment and live to fight another day.
So for one, Crystal, somebody might say, and people did make this exact argument against Bernie Sanders. Fine, he's on the stage, but I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to weaken the person who's ultimately obviously going to be the president of the United States. Why not vote for Biden in the primaries? Why? And you're wrinkling your brow because it's a ridiculous argument. I completely agree. I don't see the argument for Marianne and against Cornel West. They have nothing to do with each other. You can vote for Marianne in a primary. You can be happy that she's on the debate stage, which obviously they aren't allowing. which is material to this argument, I've got to say. Some people you're saying, what is the Green Party going to do? The Democratic Party has demonstrated that it won't host a free and fair and open primary.
Wait, I get that. But how does Cornel West getting 5% of the vote and helping unintentionally to reelect Trump, how does that move us towards our goals?
So two things. One, you said this in the now viral clip, that just framing Cornel West as the spoiler, looking at those polls. In those polls that you referenced, Biden is losing in both of them, with or without Cornel West in the race.
Now, Cornel West makes it worse.
Cornel West makes it incrementally worse.
I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not blaming people or saying like it's their fault for Trump getting reelected or whatever. But I am saying we would like it if the way the Democratic Party responded to Cornel West would be to cancel all the student loan. But we know that's not reality.
So
we know that what ought to happen and the reality of what will happen are two very different things.
Let's get to the second point.
Yeah.
You framed the 2016 votes for Jill Stein and the reaction of the Democratic Party subsequently as evidence that a concerted movement effort to withhold one's votes has been proven ineffective. It is obviously the case, Crystal, that there was not a concerted effort in 2016 or any kind of structural movement to withhold one's vote for Hillary Clinton in favor of Jill Stein. It was just a bunch of us angry Bernie bros. A very small number, by the way, because we all know sitting here that more Bernie Sanders voters in 2016 bent the knee and voted for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton voters in 2008 bent the knee and voted for Barack Obama. We all know these statistics. We've been saying them back at neoliberals for the last 5, 6, whatever years. That being said, there was no argument to control the media narrative and present an opportunity for actual leverage and change. So there wasn't like a group, there was no spokesperson, there was no politician, there was no left media that was saying, here, I have a organized movement, an organized group of people who are willing to actually change their mind and vote for the Democratic nominee in exchange for various concessions. That didn't exist. And I'm, by the way, not advocating for it. I know that some of my friends like Nathan Robinson have said that Cornel West should do exactly that, say that he'd be willing to drop out in exchange for various concessions. I think that's better than nothing. I think that's more than, frankly, I love Marianne and I hope she's successful, but that's more than Marianne is likely to get out of this. However, that is not even my plan, my perspective.
Yeah.
What I am saying, though, is that knowing that the Democratic Party is fundamentally not willing to be fair. They're willing to rig the election. They're willing to change the order of the states. They are willing to completely block Marianne out of the media. It feels rich to say that running within the Democratic Party is manifestly and demonstrably more effective in actually changing the outcomes
because of the structural barriers
than Cornel West, who at very least, you keep being very dismissive, Kyle, about this 5% matching funds.
First of all, I've said like 2 words in the past 10 minutes, okay? So I'm not being dismissive about anything.
And so before we continue, she talks about changing the order of the primary states. I think we should change the order, but I don't think we should change the order the way Biden did it. Biden did it just for his personal benefit. I've been putting South Carolina first. I've been advocating this for a long time. I've vociferously is that we shouldn't have New Hampshire and Iowa first. That doesn't make any fucking sense. They aren't important states, and they're not representative of the wider country at all. I mean, they're just white. And if here's another thing, of the Democratic Party not valuing on the space, they should be swing states that are first, because they're all the only states that fucking matter in this electoral college hellscape that we live in. And yeah, ones that are more diverse, those are the ones to be front loaded. Right now, South Carolina looks like it's going to be at the front end, and you could say, "Oh well, there's South Carolina, but it's not a swing state, and in fact, it's a red state. So why do we give a fuck what South Carolina has to say about anything within the Democratic primary? It's unbelievable." So I'll say that, and then fuck, she said, it took my tongue. You saw something else that I really want to respond to.
If I could respond, I don't really know a lot about the primary thing, so I can't really comment on it. But just something that, again, like this is just, I guess, like my own personal kind of, this is like the issue I'd have with her kind of arguing here. She's seemingly at once arguing that the Jill Stein vote.
Sorry. Well, let me get this out before I forget it. Right, just quickly. Well, so on Jill Stein, right? I think that the Green Party, right, leftists in general, like those within the Democratic Party, they should embrace the idea of being a spoiler, because that's where the power lasts, right? Like, you got to say that, hey, yeah, we actually did ruin this election for you. We should say that Jill Stein, like, if you guys really want to claim this, yeah, Jill Stein, she did fuck up the election and got Trump elected. Or that the unhappy Bernie Bros, they did do that. Yeah, actually, we did do that. And it'll happen again unless you come to the table and like take our concerns seriously. That's literally
Or
what you
unless
want.
they become more conservative.
Sorry, what?
Well, that could be one response to that happening and that strategy. But another, whether we might agree with it or not, another response that many liberals will have is going to be, okay, then there's no point in us even trying to communicate with you. What our goal should be to try to moderate ourselves to catch the anti-Trump Republicans. Not that I agree with that, but that's a completely reasonable response to that strategy. If you guys are going to play hypothetical electoral terrorism, and you guys are going to withhold your vote, obviously I'm being hyperbolic there, but you're going to withhold your vote to get your concessions, okay, fuck you. We'll go and we'll talk to the anti-Trump people. We'll stop talking about gays too much, or whatever the response will be.
Yeah, and that will be a response, and it has been their response in general. It's like that wouldn't even be a change in the status quo, right? Like,
exactly, the status quo didn't change until Bernie ran with the DNC.
But that's what I'm saying. That's I'm not sure. But anyway, but what my point is that like, yeah, they can lead into that, but it's an unsuccessful strategy of trying to get Republican voters to vote Democrat. They've tried it many times, and it continues to fail, and they will continue to have electoral failures otherwise. So I'm just saying that, like, even though that there will be that response, and you're completely correct about that, that if we racked up enough of these quote-unquote victories, we took credit for their blame, that eventually that they'd have to come and deal with us. At least that's what I hope.
You would need to be like, it would need, the progressive wing would need to be demographic wise similar to the Tea Party wing. Tea Party wing was like very, very active, very, very widespread. A lot of, it took over the GOP, right? And it became the mainstream. That, again, the progressives just aren't that. The progressives are mainly in big cities. They're mainly in already Democrat areas. You know what I mean?
Well, I'd have a response to that, but like, we have like 10 minutes left, so I want you to get your point across. And
I mean, I would ultimately, that would be my take on this, is that the progressives are not big enough to run this kind of idea of, either, capitulate with us and compromise with us, or we'll vote against you. The response is going to be the DNC flicking you off, so to speak, right? And just focusing on the anti-Trump Republicans. And I don't know, she seems to want to have her cake and eat it too. She doesn't want to admit that as you say, she doesn't want to admit that Jill Stein was any kind of a spoiler candidate. She doesn't want to admit that, but she also wants to advocate for that as being a reasonable strategy. Well, if it didn't have an effect, why are we doing it?
I think she would make space for more people to go down that route, so eventually it would have an effect.
I guess I get that, but
yeah.
Trump is not worth it. Risking Trump is not worth it to me.
I haven't gotten a fucking word in.
But she said that at the very beginning, right? That like, okay, well, I can grant you that Trump is actually an existential threat, right, to democracy. But then after that,
this is the last. Yes, I don't know. I mean, again, the post-Trump I don't have any more hope for the post-Trump Republicans than I do for the current, the Trump Republicans. You know what I mean?
I guess I'm not going to advocate for corporate Republicans and ask to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I get you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to make you sign any deal with the devil either.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it that you're chomping at the bit?
It's the structural barriers against running as a third party, as rigged as it is by the DNC against outsider Democrats, which it definitely is. It's even more rigged against third parties, which is why they always get like 3% of the vote.
Which is literally
why Bernie got 43% of the vote.
Which is literally why people feel it is a structural advantage to get someone like Cornel West to 5% of the votes so they can get federal matching funds. To me, as
He'd
a
get
voter,
40% as a Democrat.
for me as a voter in New York, I'm not interested in shoring up the Democratic Party.
No, that's him getting his ideas out.
Wait a
It's
minute.
shoring up Cornel West. That's the whole
I
point.
am not a Democrat.
I understand that. That's very clear. But I'm saying that would shore up Cornel West.
And the people who also don't want to vote for Joe Biden under any circumstances are not Democrats. And fundamentally, you can make your argument. I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument to make to Democrats. I think that Democrats might think that Joe Biden is a manifestly better Democrat than other Democrats.
But it's not about whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's about what are your political goals. And I think that we
100%.
share a lot of the same political
no,
goals.
there's a big one that we
hold
don't
on,
share.
But hold on. So I still don't understand. Just lay out for me.
Yeah.
What in the ideal scenario happens, and how does that constitute any sort of revolutionary change or help to further the goals that we largely share?
Yeah. I think, for one, getting federal matching funds for third-party candidates, since I believe third parties are going to be a much better vehicle to actual meaningful change in this country than the Democratic Party, is infinitely more significant a goal.
But
than
third parties haven't gotten a single electoral vote in
and
50
it's like round
years,
and round
Bree.
and round and round.
No,
in
but
a
it's true
circle.
because, I mean, look at Ross Perot had all the money in the world. It didn't matter.
He didn't get one electoral
He
vote.
didn't get one
Do
electoral
you
vote.
agree that
That's
ranked
the
choice
reality
voting
of the
needs to come
American
first?
political
That's the
system.
important question. Do you agree that
I think
if we get ranked choice voting, then yes, overnight third parties become more viable.
that
But
Cornel
until we
West-
get them, they're not
I
viable.
think that Cornel West running in a general election where he has been doing this. He's been talking about ranked choice voting in interviews, but continuing to talk about how the onus is on the Democratic Party to prevent the spoiler effect. He is in a position now running in a general election every time he goes on TV to say, if you're upset at me at being a spoiler, you need to look at the Democratic Party, who across the country for the last decades has been purposefully undermining any ballot measures that effectively put into effect ranked choice voting in Maine, in North Carolina, the way they attacked Matthew Hoh. I am not the enemy, they are. And that's the burden shifting, the narrative burden shifting I think the left should be engaged in right now. To the extent that you think that Cornel West can ruin Biden's chances.
This is like, I mean, I feel like this is gonna be like a really sticking point, but it's like when you simultaneously count yourself out and say, I'm not a Democrat, the Democratic Party is not the future. Yes, yet also it's on the onus of the Democratic Party to make the concessions to me. She's talking about the spoiler effect. That sounds like the sabotage effect. You know what I mean? This is like this. She's laying out a plan for which the Democratic Party can be overcome. She's saying she doesn't think the Democratic Party is going to be the vehicle for change. That there is going to need to be a third party, and she thinks that Cornel West getting that 5%, getting that matching fund, is the closest to get us there. She's advocating for a strategy to overcome the Democratic Party. She just said this. Like that seems to be like that is. I think it's very difficult to argue in favor of Biden when that's the starting position of the other side.
Well, she's saying she's not a Democrat. Like I would imagine what she would say is she's a leftist, right?
Of course, yeah.
And it's sorry.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So she would probably say that she's a leftist, and as a leftist, it is incumbent on the Democratic Party to convince her to vote for the party, right? And then that voting, getting the Green Party to 5%, while it may not get them that electoral vote, that's not the issue. That's the point of getting them resources so they can begin the fight. That the fight hasn't even begun yet because they're not at that 5% threshold. So it's worth it to put them in that 5% threshold so that they can start. I don't think the Green Party is like, has the right strategies at all, but whatever. But assuming like that's the trigger, right? The trigger is, hey, now we have funds, resources to do much bigger things, maybe to do all the things that I think they should be doing, right? And you're saying, why even bother? And like Crystal and Kyle, right? They're saying, like, why even bother with that? Like, the threat of Trump is so big that all our efforts should be just behind getting Biden in, and she's has a much wider view. She's saying that, like, good.
In my opinion, the core disagreement does not come from the wider view necessarily. I would say it comes from, as she just said, not just that she's not a Democrat, She does not believe the Democratic Party is the institution with which the change she seeks is going to come. And she thinks that there needs to be a third party. That is not the same strategy as saying, I'm going to sit over here on my left flank and I'm going to make the Democrats come to me. That's saying the Democrats are never going to come to me, so I'm unlinking myself from a sinking ship. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, I mean that. I think it's a fair interpretation. I'm not positive that's exactly what she means. Like in my mind, I think that like, and I could be wrong. On my mind, I think what she's trying to say is that she'll go for whatever vehicle will take her to the leftist outcomes that she's looking for, right? Whether that be Green Party or like,
well, I just think she's been completely convinced against the DNC ever doing that. As she says, she brings up the court filing, she brings up the treatment of Marianne, she brings up the treatment of Bernie. She has so much. She seems to be completely convinced the DNC is not going to be the engine for this.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe that might be the case. I don't know.
I just think that's what's. Oh, sorry.
But if that is the case, then there's no reason to like even like there's no reason to be upset with her, right?
I would not disagree. She's not being. I don't think she's being illogical, right?
No.
But I would absolutely say it is very frustrating to feel on one hand her critique is, well, I'm just critiquing Biden. I'm just pointing out Biden's not doing his promise, while on the other hand saying I actually think that we need to overcome and out and move beyond the DNC, right? Obviously, she's being upfront with that, but Kyle and Crystal were upfront of their support. That's their entire premise. They support the DNC. They're surprised by the DNC. She's not obfuscating it, right? But she is not. She's not bringing together her perspective as much as the other side is. In my personal position, you know what I mean? You could, and we're having this debate. You could listen at different points of this, and you will never get the sense that Kyle or Crystal don't support the DNC. Every word they say, you get the very clear they think the DNC is going to be a vehicle for change. You could listen to this clips of Brianna talking and get the case that she's advocating for a reform of the DNC, and listens to other parts of her speech, and she's very obviously saying we need to move beyond the DNC. And that's what is so frustrating. You, one hand, have these expectations of the Republican or of the DNC that you, on the other hand, already agreed they're never going to meet.
Okay, I agree with you.
Yeah, that would just be the frustration. I think there is a lot of I think there's a lot of room to have the kind of discussions about moving beyond the DNC, but we need to be honest with ourselves. If we've already decided to move beyond the DNC, there's no point critiquing Biden.
Well, but then again, like I hear that, and I think mostly you're pretty much spot on. But then the scope of this debate is like, should we give space to third parties, right? Is it wrong to be supporting them? And she's defending that, like, yes, you can support them. Yes, Cornel West is having his strategy is worthwhile. Right, that's what she's supporting, rather than like simply like the Democratic Party is wrong or whatever. Like her point, like her focus is on like defending that strategy and like not like necessarily like anything else. I don't know. Right? Does that make sense?
No. Again. I think that something you keep going back to, what I think is true, is many times when you have a longer view of a situation, many times you're going to have perspectives that maybe don't go together in a simple sentence. I get that. Kyle and Crystal's argument temporally is much more simple. DNC good, GOP bad. We need to win so they don't win, so Trump don't win. Trump win bad. Very simple. What do we need to do? Win the next election. Who are they better ban? The other guys. She is, to her defense, is taking a much larger picture of these things, and she may be, and so that's what I think that's what a big anxiety that comes from these two perspectives.
Okay. This 10:30, and I know you gotta.
Yes. I always enjoy this, but I do gotta feed my lovely family.
Okay.
They have oh, sorry. I just of course the chat draws me in right as I'm trying to leave.
But yeah, shout out to my man Kobe. We gotta go because he's gotta he's responsible. He's a better son than I am, just like up and down. Like it's simply is the case. But
Shush.
but yeah, we're going to continue. We'll be back. Well, hopefully next week. We'll cross our fingers on that one, right? Whether we'll be back next week or not. That's our goal. That's our plan. This has been a lot of fun. I don't know if we'll continue this next week or not. We'll decide, I guess. But we had a lot of fun discussing this. And I always have fun with my friend Kobe. So shout out to you, man.
Hey, shout out to you. As always, I feel like every single time we have one of these conversations, I feel like both of us catch each other in a moment where we ask each other something, and the other person has to stop and be like, "Okay, wait a second here." Right? I've recently started. I read a really good quote recently. This is the last thing I was saying. I started reading a biography of Henry Kissinger, and this is a quote that Henry Kissinger said. He said, "Do not follow one's principles off a cliff." And that's what I like talking about you. Is you're very good at pointing out the cliffs I'm about to go off. You go, hold on a second here, Kobe. You keep yours. You love this path here. You're very sure on this path. You point me up. You give me binoculars. I look into your binoculars, and you show me a cliff I'm about to run off. And I realize, okay, I got to take this seriously. Maybe not. You know what I mean? You point out a flaw, and I love when that happens to myself. I love being able to do that to other people. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Interesting. I have feelings about taking advice from like a psychopath mass murderer, but okay.
Yeah.
I mean everyone there's something to learn from everyone, I guess, right? So fair. And did he even have any principles? Okay, all right, so I'll leave it alone. But thank you so much, Kobe. And yeah, I feel the same way about you though. And that like you get me to stop and think. So shout out to my friend. All right, I'm gonna send the Twitch audience off to our friend Nina who's streaming, and then yeah, we'll do more in the future. That'll be cool.